Merry Christmas and welcome to Storytime with Cozy Malka. This holiday season, we'll be sharing stories of generosity, responsibility, and compassion. As we gather around, let's put on our listening ears as we read special holiday tales together. Today's story is Kristen's Surprise, A Christmas Story, the American Girls Collection, by Janet Shaw, illustrations by Renee Gariff. So without further ado, let's find a cozy spot, grab a friend like Jade here, and enjoy a great holiday story. Chapter 1, Pestering. The first year that Kristen and her family lived in the little log cabin on Uncle Olaf's farm in Minnesota, the autumn weather lasted into December. Although the stream froze and they had to melt ice for water, there was only a little snow. Papa often stroked his beard and pointed to the geese flying south. "A very hard winter is on the way," he said. "It will be much colder here than in Sweden. We have to get ready for the deep snows." But Kristen thought the traces of snow on the pines looked like the sugar Mama sprinkled on ginger snaps, light and sweet. It was hard to believe winter was coming. One day when Kristen came into the cabin after school, she smelled cinnamon. "Something smells delicious," she said. "What are you making, Mama?" Mama had her sleeves rolled up and her apron on. "It's time to bake Christmas bread," she answered. "Come help me." Kristen washed her hands and tied one of Mama's long aprons over her school dress. "Don't forget to cover your hands with flour so the dough won't stick," Mama said. She took several loaves of risen bread dough from the cupboard and set them on the pine table in front of Kristen. Kristen pushed her fingers into the dough and punched it down. When the air was out of the dough, she shaped it into round loaves to rise a second time. The smell of yeast and spices made her mouth water. "Will Christmas in America be just like it was in Sweden?" Kristen asked Mama. Mama wiped her hands on her apron. "I don't know, Kristen. Some things here are different. And we don't have money for extra treats, but we'll do the best we can." Mama must have seen that Kristen was disappointed, for she added, "Here, take a piece of dough and make a loaf of bread for your doll." As Kristen rolled the piece of dough between her palms, she glanced at little Sari. Little Sari lay on Kristen's trundle bed. She wasn't a real doll at all. She was only a worn stocking stuffed with milkweed floss. Kristen had made her because she missed her real Sari so much. Real Sari was her pretty face and her blue dress, was still far away in Riverton. Kristen had to leave her there last summer when all the money Papa had saved for their trip to America was gone. He couldn't hire a wagon to carry their trunks, so they'd left most of their things in a warehouse and walked the last 20 miles to Uncle Olaf's farm. "I wish I had my real Sari," Kristen said. She set the little doll loaf of bread on the wooden tray with the big loaves Mama had shaped. "I know you miss your doll," Mama said, "but work comes before play. We needed both your hands to carry tools and blankets that day." Mama's voice softened. "And you'll see Sari again soon. Mr. Burkhoff sent word that the trunks had been shipped as far as a store in Maryville. When Papa has time, he can take the wagon to get them." "Oh, could he go today?" Kristen asked happily. "Maryville is 10 miles away, Kristen," Mama said. "It will take Papa half a day to get there and back with the wagon. It's too late to go today." "Will he go tomorrow?" "No, Kristen," Mama said. "He won't have time tomorrow." "Couldn't we just ask him?" Kristen asked. It would only make him cross to ask," Mama said. "Papa is too busy now." "When will Papa have time?" Kristen knew she was pestering Mama, but she wanted the trunks and Sari so badly that she couldn't help herself. Mama leaned across the table to brush flour off of Kristen's nose. "Papa and Uncle Olaf have to get the farm ready for winter. That comes first. Be patient a little while longer, Kristen." "Well, why don't you and I take the wagon and get the trunks? You know how to drive the horse and wagon, Mama." Now Mama smiled. "You're full of ideas today. But there's school for you tomorrow, and we aren't strong enough to lift those big trunks. We can get along with what we have until Papa has his work done." "But don't you want the shawl Mormor made for you and your candlesticks?" Kristen asked. She looked around the bare little cabin. "We all need the heavy quilts and our warm clothes for winter, and Papa needs his hand tools, and I need Sari, or at least I miss her. Don't you miss your things too?" Mama patted the last loaf of bread and set it on the tray. "People are more important than things, Kristen." Kristen traced a heart shape in the flour on the table. "You always say that, Mama, but things help me remember people too. When I wear my sweater for Mormor, I can picture her knitting it for me. If I could see the Christmas cloths you both wove for the rafters, I'd feel like she was here with us." Mama had the dough tray halfway into the cupboard, and now she stopped and looked closely at Kristen. Even in the dim cabin, Mama's eyes were as blue as the cloudless sky. "You're a wise girl, Kristen. Our things can have special meanings for us. They help us to remember. I feel just as you do." "You do?" Kristen asked. Mama nodded. "I often think of the day we finished packing the painted trunk to bring it to America. Do you remember that day?" I remember it was spring and there were buds on the maple tree. Mormer and your friend Mrs. Hanson came early in the morning and stayed all day to help us, Kristen said. We were used to working together, Mama said softly. How carefully Mormer folded our sweaters, and Mrs. Hanson brought dried lavender to put in with our linen so they would smell sweet when we unpacked them here. Mama gazed at the window as though she could see Kristen's grandmother and Mrs. Hanson right now. I remember how you all laughed when Peter begged to put his sled into the trunk, Kristen said. And how we all cried when we said goodbye, Mama whispered. We knew we would never see each other again. Kristen was surprised to see tears in Mama's blue eyes. She didn't know that Mama could get homesick, too. Mama, are you all right? Kristen asked. Abruptly, Mama turned and shoved the bread tray into the cupboard. Of course I'm all right. She poured coffee into the coffee pail and held it out to Kristen. Now take this hot coffee out to the barn for Papa. He forgets to rest and warm himself unless we remind him. Let's get on with our work, Kristen. Papa stood at the back of the wagon to fork hay into the barn. His cheeks were red from work and from cold. He climbed down and took the coffee pail from Kristen. Just what I need, he said as he sipped the streaming coffee. Bits of hay stuck to his work jacket and his beard. Kristen leaned against the wagon wheel. Papa, could you go to town tomorrow to get the trunks? Mom and I need some things from the painted trunk especially. Papa glanced at Kristen over the rim of the pail as he sipped. When all of our work is done here, I'll go for the trunks, he said. First things first. Kristen looked around at the wide fields. The farm was large, and she could see that there was still much to be done. When will all the work be finished? She asked. It must be done before the heavy snows come, or we won't get through the winter. Now don't pester me, Kristen, he said gruffly. But when he handed her back the empty coffee pail, he patted her shoulder. I'll get the trunks as soon as I have time. But Papa didn't have time. The hogs had to be butchered and the meat smoked. Papa and Uncle Olaf spent a whole week repairing fences. They put new runners on the sleigh and new shoes on the horse. In the evenings, they mended harness leather and stuffed extra clay between the logs in the cabin walls to make the cabin extra warm. They put up a fence to keep snowdrifts off the path to the barn. When the heavy snows came, it would be too late to do these important things. Kristen knew that when the heavy snows came, it would be too late to get the trunks too. The drifts would block the road into Maryville, and the snow would melt until spring. She couldn't wait until spring to have Sari back. The more Kristen thought about the trunks, the more reasons she found for wanting them. Surely Lars wanted his skates, and Peter wanted his clay whistle, and she thought that unpacking the painted trunk would be like a visit home for Sweden for Mama. Every night, when she said her prayers, she prayed that Papa would get the trunks soon. Chapter 2, A Crown for a Queen. Kristen sat with Lisbeth and Anna in a cozy corner of the barn. These days it was much too cold to play in their fort under the cherry tree, so they brought their dolls inside and scooped out rooms for them in the sweet-smelling hay. The barn cats prowled around, swishing their tails, but they were too wild to be petted or put into doll dresses. Kristen was trying to make a dress for little Sari. She wrapped little Sari in one of Papa's white handkerchiefs and tied a piece of red yarn around it for a sash. Then she pretended to walk little Sari across the hay to Anna. Do you think little Sari looks like St. Lucia? She asked Anna. Anna looked up in surprise. Who? St. Lucia. Don't you know St. Lucia? Kristen asked, puzzled. Anna shook her head. Is she someone you knew in Sweden? Now Kristen was really startled. No, Anna, we celebrated St. Lucia's Day in Sweden. It was the very best part of Christmas. I don't remember Sweden, Lisbeth said. I was just a baby when Mama left. We just celebrate Christmas Day. Kristen's spirits fell. She hoped this first Christmas in America would be just like Christmas in Sweden. How could it? If they didn't have St. Lucia's Day, she thought Mama would be disappointed too. It was her favorite celebration. Tell us about St. Lucia's Day, Anna said. She sat her doll on her lap as though the doll was listening too. In Sweden, St. Lucia's Day begins the Christmas season, Kristen explained. It's the darkest day of the whole year. It's so dark that there's only daylight for a few hours, but no one minds the dark because St. Lucia's Day is so much fun. Lisbeth was braiding a straw belt for her doll. What do you do? In each family, one girl gets to be the Lucia Queen. She dresses up in a long white dress and a red sash, and she wears a crown of green leaves and lighted candles. She gets up very, very early in the morning while it's still pitch black and everyone is asleep. She lights the candles in her crown and she goes from room to room to room in the dark house carrying a tray. First she goes to her parents' room, even though they helped her get ready. They can hardly believe their eyes when they see her. She looks so beautiful in her costume. Then she wakes all the rest of the family and invites them to share St. Lucia buns and coffee. That breakfast is the first party of the holiday season, Kristen explains. Anna's gray eyes grew wider and she hugged herself. Oh, a white dress and a crown. It sounds beautiful. I wish we had St. Lucia's Day. That gave Kristen an idea. She motioned for her cousins to draw closer together. Why don't we make a St. Lucia's celebration? Just the three of us. We won't tell our parents or the boys. We'll get everything ready and surprise them. Wouldn't that be fun? Anna's round face glowed with excitement. We'll keep it a secret. Oh, I love secrets. Elizabeth cocked her head and frowned. It would be exciting, all right, but how could we get all the special things we need? That won't be hard, Kristen insisted. Mama always has coffee, and we can slice a loaf of our Christmas bread and pretend it's Lucia buns. That takes care of the tray. How about the crown? Elizabeth asked. I think we can make one from a wild grapevine and wintergreen leaves. It shouldn't be too hard to do. As Kristen planned, she grew more and more excited. Now Anna was too eager to sit still. She hopped to her feet and waved her arms, and the cat scattered and hissed. You can be St. Lucia, Kristen, because you know how, Anna cried. But where will we get a white dress and red sash? Asked Elizabeth. I have a white dress, Kristen answered. Well, it's really a white nightdress, but it's just what we need. I wore it last year for St. Lucia's Day. It's in our trunk. Now the three girls looked at each other in silence. Then they each let out a sigh. But your trunks aren't here, Elizabeth said. When is St. Lucia's Day? Anna asked. It's December 13th, Kristen said. Quickly she counted on her fingers. That's 5 whole days from now. Elizabeth shrugged sadly. Then it's no use planning. If your father doesn't get to that trunk, there's no white dress and sash. Anna let herself tumble backwards into the hay. When she got up, hay was stuck in her braids. It was a grand idea, but we don't have candles for the crown either. Mama would surely miss them if we took them without asking her. But now Kristen was determined to make a St. Lucia celebration. She had to think of something. Of course, they could ask Miss Winton. Kristen got to her knees and grabbed Anna's ankle to get her attention. We could ask Miss Winston to get us some candles and help us. Miss Winston was a teacher at Powder Keg School. She'd been living at Uncle Olaf's house for several weeks and would stay here all winter until she moved in with another family. Anna grinned. Oh, I know Miss Winston would like a party. She's been telling us about the Christmas parties they had back east. It makes her sad to think she'll miss them. And she has extra candles in her trunk. That still leaves the dress, Lisbeth said slowly. I don't know. Lisbeth, Papa practically promised me that he'd get the trunks soon, Kristen said. We'll make all the things we need and we'll practice. When he gets the trunks, we'll be ready. Lisbeth looked relieved. We should start getting everything ready now. We'll have to practice up in our room so the boys won't know what we're doing. And we'll have to hide the crown under the bed, won't we? Anna cried. Or under Miss Winston's bed. They'll never look there. Suddenly, Lisbeth held her finger to her lips. Shh. Kristen listened. She heard the cows mooing and Papa's deep voice as he brought them in to be milked. It's Papa, she whispered. Go right now and tell him to get the trunks, Lisbeth said. Tell him it's important. Kristen took a deep breath. She knew how Papa hated to be pestered, but she had to ask him about the trunks one more time. She climbed out of the hay and went over to Papa, who sat on a small stool milking a brown cow. He leaned his forehead against the cow's side. Steam rose from the pail of warm milk. Papa, I've been thinking about our trunks again. Can you please get them soon? Kristen said. Papa's breath was a white cloud at his lips. He raised his eyebrows. Just why are the trunks so important, Kristen? Kristen stubbed her boot against the empty bucket. I remembered our candlesticks are in the painted trunk. Mama will want the candlesticks for Christmas. We all want things we can't have. I've heard enough about that trunk, Papa said. He squirted a stream of milk into the mouth of the gray cat by Kristen's feet. Please, Papa. Now Papa scowled. Don't ask me again or I'll be angry. Kristen walked slowly to the stall where Blackie, Uncle Olaf's horse, munched hay. She patted his coat, which was thickened against the cold. What else can I do now? She murmured to Blackie. Everything depends on that trunk. Blackie snuffed and pushed his soft nose against her hand as though he sensed she needed comfort. On the way home from school the next day, Kristen cut a length of grapevine and Lisbeth picked wintergreen. They took them to Anna and Lisbeth's sleeping loft to work on the St. Lucia crown. Miss Winston was there. She sat on her bed to grade arithmetic tests. Of course you may use some of my candles, she said when they asked her for them. She took 3 new candles from her trunk at the foot of her bed and cut them into 2 to make them the right length. I'll hide the crown in my trunk if you like, Miss Winston added. I like surprises too. So that part was easy, but making the crown was harder. First crown Liz was braided was too small. It looked like a bird's nest, Anna said when she saw it perched on top of Kristen's head. Second crown Lisbeth made was much too large. It slipped right down over Kristen's head and lay around her neck. And that one looks like Blackie's harness, Anna told her. Measure Kristen's head first, Miss Winston suggested. She gave Lisbeth a piece of string. Lisbeth tied the string around Kristen's head. Then she braided the grapevine exactly the size of the circle of string. This time the crown fit perfectly. Lisbeth stuck sprigs of wintergreen into the braided vine, and Miss Winston set the candles in securely. Then they decided how the tray would be laid out. We'll have coffee and Christmas bread and a candle in the center. All the lights will be out except for the candles, Kristen said. St. Lucia comes into a dark room with her crown glowing. Anna put the crown on her own head and pretended to carry a tray. She walked slowly around the room. "What does St. Lucia say now?" she asked. "Say, St. Lucia invites you to breakfast," Kristen told her. Anna cried, "Oh, this is fun." Elizabeth came to sit on the bed beside Kristen. She took Kristen's hand. "This is a good plan, really it is. If your trunk doesn't come in time for St. Lucia's Day, we can have the celebration next year. Don't worry, Kristen," Elizabeth said. But Kristen couldn't help but worry. She had butterflies in her stomach. She'd gotten everyone's hopes up, especially her own. She would just have to wait and see what happens. There was nothing else she could do now. Chapter 3. To Town at Last. On Wednesday, Kristen woke to the sound of voices. Except for the fire in the stove, the cabin was so dark and cold that she could see her breath. From her bed, she saw that thick ice covered the little window. Peter and Lars still slept, their heads almost hidden under their covers, but Mom and Papa were up. They sat at the pine table, talking softly. Kristen stayed under her quilt and listened. "We finished putting up the snow fences yesterday," Papa said. "I think we were just in time. It looks like we'll have another heavy snow soon, but I could drive into town today. Olaf won't need the horse. What do you think?" "If it's safe for you to go, you should try. One more hard snow." I'll put my legs down. Good girl. "One more hard snow and the roads will be blocked until spring," Mama said. "Will you pack me a lunch then? I'll leave as soon as the milking is done and be back with the trunks before supper time," Papa said. The trunks! Now Kristen was wide awake, her heart pounding. Tomorrow was St. Lucia's Day. They would get the trunks just in time. She was out of the bed with a leap. She ran across the rough boards of the cabin floor and threw her arms around Mama's neck. "Oh, Mama, may I please go along in the wagon to get our trunks? It doesn't matter if I miss one day of school." Papa was already pulling on his heavy boots. "There's too much snow for the wagon. I'm going to hitch Blackie to the sleigh, and there's not much room in that small sleigh, Kristen." "But I don't take up much room," Kristen cried. "It's a long drive. You'll get cold. Go to school with your brothers," Papa said. "But I want to go with you more than anything in the world, Papa." "Do you want to come with me that much?" Papa asked. "What will you do?" "I can help you, I'm sure, but I can keep you company so you won't get lonely," Kristen said. "Please say yes." She thought Papa might scowl because he didn't like to be urged to change his mind, but instead he just laughed. "You have a strong will, Kristen, just like your mama. You may come with me, eat your breakfast, and dress in your warmest clothes, and bring in a bucket of snow so Mama will have water today. I'll hitch up the sleigh, and we'll be on our way. Hurry now." Kristen hurried. She put on 2 pairs of wool stockings, all of her quilted petticoats, her heaviest sweater, and a shawl. She ate her pancakes. She watched Mama pack a lunch in the hamper and heat stones in the oven. The warm stones would keep Kristen's and Papa's feet cozy in the sleigh. The first rays of light came through the clouds as Papa brought the sleigh from the barn. Kristen climbed into the sleigh beside Papa, and Mama handed her the food hamper. "Here's your lunch, and I put in a loaf of Christmas bread for you to give Mr. Burkhoff at the store. We might not see him again until spring. Tell him we wish him a happy Christmas." Mama stood by the gate and waved as the sleigh pulled away towards town. "Take care," she called after them. Blackie whinnied and stamped. The harness bells around his neck jingled merrily. Kristen laughed with pleasure when she heard the bells. She remembered the wonderful holidays in Sweden, the sleigh rides they'd taken to church and to the homes of their friends. Snow was falling as Kristen and Papa left the farm. The snowflakes settled on Blackie's back like moths and caught in Kristen's eyelashes. Papa turned the horse east towards the small town of Maryville. Now the wind was at their backs. Under a fur blanket, Kristen was snug by Papa's side. Papa's wide-brimmed hat was pulled low. He wore sheepskin mittens with high tops that came up over his jacket cuffs and a red scarf Mama had knitted for him. As he slid along, he began to sing a Christmas carol. His deep voice seemed to fill up his whole chest, and to push ahead of them through the softly falling snow. Kristen sang too. She was happy. In no time they'd picked up their trunks and be back at the farm. Then tomorrow morning before dawn, she and Lisbeth and Anna would surprise everyone with a St. Lucia celebration. Their plans were turning out perfectly after all. By the time they reached Maryville, it was snowing harder. The soft snow made caps on the tops of the fence posts and piled up on the shingled rooftops. Kristen and Papa drove past houses, the church, and the sawmill, then stopped in front of Burkhoff's general store. While Papa unhitched Blackie from the sleigh, Kristen watched the men and women in the street. She was glad to smell wood smoke in the air and to hear people greeting one another. Maryville was only a little town, but it had a happy bustle. Inside the store, the delicious scents of spices, new cloth, oiled leather, and sausages reached Kristen's nose all at once. Mr. Burkhoff stood behind the scales, weighing sugar. When he saw Kristen and Papa, he wiped his hands on his white apron and came around the counter to shake Papa's hand. He gave Kristen a piece of hard sugar candy from one of the glass jars. It's not Christmas yet, but I have a little treat, he said. Kristen handed him the loaf of Christmas bread Mama had sent. Mama sends you a Merry Christmas greeting, she said, and thank you for the candy. Mr. Burkhoff raised his white eyebrows. Kristen Larson, the last time you were in my store, you spoke to me in Swedish. Kristen felt herself blush. I'm learning English. So you are, and you speak it very well, too, Mr. Burkhoff said. Thank your mother for the bread. We're here to pick up our trunks, Papa said. Come with me, Mr. Burkhoff said. He took them to a big storage room in the back of the store. Wooden boxes and barrels were piled clear up to the ceiling. Mr. Burkhoff pushed aside some crates to let Kristen and Papa through. There by the back door, they saw the two big trunks with Anders Larson painted on their sides. Papa slapped the trunks with his open hand the way he slapped the cows. Well, Kristen, here are things at last. Kristen leaned against a painted trunk. She traced the flower paintings with her fingertip. Sari was in the trunk, right there under the lid. The white nightdress and red sash she needed for St. Lucia's Day would be near all of Mama's lovely weavings, and at the bottom of the trunk there would be heavy wooden sweaters, caps, mittens, and the shiny brass candlesticks. Oh, everything was in the trunk. It seemed like an old dear friend Kristen had met again after a long time. She pressed her cheek against the rounded top. Papa, let's open the trunk now, she said. I want to hold Sari on the sleigh ride home. Papa and Mr. Burkhoff pushed the trunks out the back door onto the loading platform. We'll open the trunks when we get home, Papa said. We've got to go right now. It's snowing harder, and we have a long drive back home. Mr. Burkhoff squinted up at the snow. Maybe you folks should stay here until the snow stops, Mr. Larson. Thank you, Papa said, but I think we'd leave now, before the snow gets heavier. Don't get lost, Mr. Burkhoff warned. This looks like it will be a storm. He lifted Kristen into the sleigh beside Papa. Merry Christmas, Kristen called back to Mr. Burkhoff as Papa drove the sleigh away from the store. Mr. Burkhoff's answering call was muffled by the thud of Blackie's steps in the snow. Merry Christmas to you, too. Chapter 4, Braving the Blizzard. As they left Maryville in the loaded sleigh, the snow seemed to fall harder every minute. It stung Kristen's cheeks until she pulled her shawl up over her nose. Papa urged Blackie faster, but now the horse had the extra weight of the trunks to pull, and the sleigh didn't skim along as it had done before. Look at that sky, Papa said. The weather's changed while we waited in the store. When the road turned west towards the farm, Kristen saw that the sleigh tracks they made earlier were filling with snow. A strong wind drove the snow directly into their faces. There was no way to hide from it. Pull the blanket over your head, Papa told Kristen. She curled up next to Papa's side and buried her face under his arm. She could hear the thump of Papa's heart and the muffled jingle of the sleigh bells as Blackie trotted along. The next time Kristen peeked over the edge of the blanket, all she could see was white. Snow swirled up from the fields like spray blown from the tops of waves. Drifts shifted and moved as Blackie stepped along. Papa's beard was filled with snow. His mustache was white with it. His eyes were blue slits under the snow-caked eyebrows. Where's the road, Papa? Kristen asked. I can't see it. We're following the fence posts. Blackie can find his way, though. He's a smart horse, Papa said. Do you think we should go back to Maryville? We've already come a long way. I think there's a better chance the horse knows his way to the farm. If we just keep heading west, we'll be all right. But Papa frowned into the fiercely blowing snow. Kristen was worried, too. She'd heard stories about settlers who lost their way in blizzards and walked in circles until they fell down. She'd heard about a boy who froze to death when he got lost between his barn and his house. A snowstorm on the plains was as dangerous as a storm on the ocean. Blackie's harness bells sounded faint and lost. His ears were down, his head low. Papa urged him to keep going, but the horse often stumbled in the moving drifts. Kristen's feet were so cold she could barely move her toes. Under her feet, she felt the stones Mama had heated that morning. The warmth had long since gone out of them. Toss the stones out of the sleigh, Papa told her. We should make this load lighter. The trunks are heavier than I remembered. But we won't leave our trunks in the snow, will we? Kristen asked. Papa patted her knee. No, we won't leave our trunks. The snow will let up soon. You'll see. He slapped the reins against Blackie's back, which was thickly covered with snow. Then there were no more fence posts to follow. They drove along beside a dim shadow that Kristen knew was the edge of the forest. But Blackie walked more and more slowly. Often Papa had to flick the whip across his back to keep him moving. He wants to turn his back to the wind, Papa said, but we have to go straight into the wind if we're going to get back to the farm. Keep going, Blackie, Kristen shouted. Her words seemed to disappear into the snow and wind. All at once Blackie stopped. He wouldn't move. Yo, Papa yelled. Get up there. It was no use. The horse wouldn't take a single step. What's wrong with him? Kristen asked. He loses his footing in the snow, and that frightens him, Papa said. I'll have to lead him to keep him moving. Papa handed Kristen the reins, wrapped the blanket tightly around her waist, and climbed down from the sleigh. He stepped through snowdrifts to Blackie's head and took hold of the bridle. "Come on, Blackie, come on now!" Papa made his voice both gruff and soothing. The horse took one step, stopped, then took another step. The bells jingled again. Kristen realized she'd been holding her breath. She let out a sigh. Blackie trusted Papa. Now they'd keep going towards home. They went slowly, step by difficult step. Papa climbed through knee-high drifts. Even though he was only a few feet in front of her, Kristen could hardly see him. He was completely covered with snow. Papa pulled Blackie's bridle, and Kristen slapped Blackie's flanks with the reins. The snow and cold made Kristen lightheaded. Sometimes it seemed the sleigh wasn't moving at all. Only the snow seemed to move, like water running in a stream. Then Papa stumbled. He went down to his knees and cried out. Kristen had never heard Papa cry out in pain before, and the sound was colder than the wind. "Papa!" she shouted. "Papa, are you all right?" She jumped out of the sleigh. The snow came up to her hips, but Kristen pushed through it to Papa's side. Papa tried to stand, but again he went down in the snow. "What's the matter, Papa?" "My knee. I twisted my knee. I can't put weight on it," he said. His face was very pale, his lips white. There was ice in his mustache. "What can I do?" Kristen begged him. "Nothing, Kristen. It's up to Blackie now," Papa answered. "We can't stop here. We have to reach shelter." He dragged himself back to the sleigh, breathing hard. Kristen wondered how he would ever get back into the high front seat. At last Papa managed to crawl up. Then he reached down to help Kristen up beside him, but when he snapped the whip over Blackie's back, the horse wouldn't budge. "It's no good," Papa said. "With no one to lead him, he'll stay right there." Kristen grabbed Papa's hand. "But I can lead Blackie," she said. "You stay in the sleigh and I'll walk beside him. Do you think you can walk through this deep snow?" "I'll try, Papa." Papa brushed the snow off Kristen's shoulders and tied her shawl more tightly over her nose and mouth. Then he pulled up his sheepskin mittens and put them on her hands. Inside Papa's mittens and fleece was warm and dry. Kristen's cold hands felt like rabbits creeping into a snug home. "You're a good girl, Kristen," Papa said. "You have heart." Papa told Mama she had heart when she agreed to come here to America. He told Mama she had heart when she was so sick on the ship but didn't lose hope. Kristen wanted to be brave as Mama. She pulled herself along Blackie's side. She shook the harness and made the bell sound. "Yo!" she cried in the biggest voice she could manage. "Yo, Blackie, come along!" To her surprise, the horse's head came up and he followed her. But the going was hard. Kristen's feet slipped, the drifts were up to her knees, and now her feet were so numb she couldn't even wiggle her toes. Like the horse, she bent her head into the wind and concentrated on just one step, then the next, then the next. Snow caked on her lips. "Keep going," she told herself. "Have heart, Kristen." But she didn't know where she was going. The whole world was a white blowing snowdrift, and it would soon be dark. Then how would they ever find the way home? Kristen tried to imagine their home, the little snug cabin somewhere in the storm. It would be warm there. She imagined Mama making soup for supper. She imagined Elizabeth and Anna waiting to make the St. Lucia's Day surprise. "Keep going," Kristen told herself. She tried to sing a Christmas carol to keep her spirits up, but her lips were so cold she could barely move them. Instead, she began to count the way Miss Winston drilled numbers in school. 1, 2, 3, 4. That was 4 steps closer to home. 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 steps closer to home. Kristen was glad she learned her numbers. Maybe the numbers would keep her moving. 9, 10, 11. She bumped into something. She fell against Blackie's side and looked around. They weren't in the fields near the forest anymore. They were near some rocks. "We've come the wrong way," Papa called. "The horse has taken us into a valley by the stream. He's lost." Kristen shielded her eyes from the snow to look. She knew where they were. Blackie hadn't come the wrong way at all. These were the cliffs she'd gone to with Singing Bird, her Indian friend. There were the forked birch trees bent over by the wind. She knew that tree. She'd passed it on her way to the cave where she and Singing Bird had sometimes played. Kristen struggled back to Papa. She reached up and grabbed his hand. "I know where we are, Papa." "How can you know where we are, Kristen? The horse has lost his way." "I've been here," Kristen cried. "You've been here. Where are we?" Papa asked. "We're beside a cliff." "There's a tiny cave nearby," Kristen pointed. Papa looked up at the cliff. "How far to the cave?" "It's only a little way, and there's dry wood inside. We can stay there until the storm is over," Kristen said. Papa tried to stand, but his leg gave out, and he sat down again. "Can you take care of Blackie?" he asked. "Yes, I'm sure I can." Then unharness him from the sleigh and lead him to that clump of birch trees. He'll rest there and be glad of it. Groaning, Papa crawled down from the sleigh. He sat in the snow and pushed himself backwards, inching up the slope towards the opening of the cave. As Papa climbed, Kristen took Blackie's harness off. It was hard to do in Papa's big mittens, so she pulled one off and held it in her teeth while she worked at the buckle. Blackie followed her a few yards to the shelter in the clump of trees, and she tied his reins to the birch tree, he whinnied. Kristen brushed the snow from his forelock and his face. "Good old Blackie, you have heart, don't you know that? You're a very brave horse." Then she followed Papa up the path to the cave. Inside, the cave was dry and not very deep. Near the back was a pile of dry sticks and grass, and the black traces of campfires the Indians had made. Singing Bird had said they sometimes stayed there when they were hunting. Papa twisted a handful of dry grass, then laid dry sticks over it. He chipped at a piece of stone with his flint until he got sparks. A tiny flame began in the dry grass. Papa blew gently at the sticks, caught fire. Kristen brought a larger branch and laid it by the little fire. First, we must warm up your feet, Kristen. Take off your boots, Papa said. He leaned against the dry wall of the cave. Kristen spread the blanket next to Papa, sat down and loosened her bootlaces. When she got her boots off, Papa began to rub her feet gently with his warm hands. Soon her toes started to tingle. She knew it was a good sign that they hurt, because they weren't frozen. Papa took off his own boots now and put a thick log on the fire. When did you come to this cave? He asked her. Because Kristen didn't want to tell him about Singing Bird and the Indians, she said, I was exploring along the stream and I found it. Did you have permission to be so far from the farm? Papa asked sternly. Kristen shook her head. No, Papa, I wandered further than I thought. The ice was melting from Papa's beard, and she saw that he smiled at her. I'm glad that you're a little explorer, Kristen. I'm glad you found this cave. Do you think you could find your way back to the farm from here? I think so, Papa. Then lie back and rest, Papa said. There's nothing we can do until it stops snowing, and you must be very, very tired. Now that they were resting, Kristen realized she was hungry. She too was exhausted to climb down the path and get what was left of their lunch from the sleigh, but in her pocket she found the piece of sugar candy Mr. Burkhoff had given her at the general store. The candy was shaped like a Christmas bell. She put it in her mouth and lay down beside Papa. The last thing she knew before she fell into a deep sleep was the taste of cinnamon and sugar on her tongue. Chapter 5, Silent Night, Lucia Light. When Kristen woke, Papa was brushing dirt on the fire to put it out. Outside it was very dark. The night sky was clear, but there was no moon. The storms have gone past, Papa said. Now we can make our way home if you can lead Blackie. I still can't stand on my leg. Kristen rubbed her eyes and sat up. I can lead him, she said. She rolled up the blanket and Papa helped her into her boots, which he'd warmed by the fire. While Papa crawled slowly down the path, she untied Blackie and hitched him to the sleigh. The fresh snow gleamed in the starlight. It must be very late if the moon has gone down, Kristen thought. She imagined Mama peering out of the cabin window, looking for them. Mama would be worried. As Kristen led Blackie beside the stream, she watched for familiar landmarks. From time to time, she looked back at Papa in the sleigh and at the painted trunk under its roof of snow. The sleigh bells jingled crisply in the still night. At last, Kristen recognized a big oak tree and the last curve in the stream where she'd often met Singing Bird. But the woods looked different in the deep snow. Was this the place where they should turn to find the farm? She hesitated. Blackie nudged her with his nose. Yes, this must be the way. Before Kristen saw the cabin in Uncle Olaf's house, she smelled wood smoke. Then they came around a turn, and she saw the candles lit up in all the windows of Uncle Olaf's house. Everyone was waiting there. They'd stayed up all night to look for her and Papa. Kristen led Blackie right up to Uncle Olaf's door, and they approached. Papa shouted, We're here! We're safe! Faces appeared at all the windows. The door swung wide, and Mama ran out. Here you are at last! We were so worried, she said as she hugged Kristen. But you're hurt! She added that she saw Papa. She climbed into the sleigh to hug him, too. Everyone crowded around the sleigh, asking questions. Uncle Olaf helped Papa down from the sleigh, and Aunt Inger said, I'll heat some soup to warm your chilly bones. Lisbeth, Anna, and Miss Winston all hugged Kristen. Even Lars squeezed his shoulder before he went to untie their trunks. Peter was jumping up and down in front of the stove. We stayed up all night to watch for you. Even Miss Winston stayed up all night, he said. For a moment, Kristen stood in the doorway to the kitchen and just stared. It seemed to her that she and Papa had been gone for days instead of hours, and now the world seemed turned upside down. It was the middle of the night, but in the kitchen where all the lamps were lit, it was bright as day. Aunt Inger bustled about heating the potato soup, but everyone was wearing nightclothes. Kristen smiled to see Uncle Olaf with his nightshirt tucked into his trousers and his sleeping cap still on his head. She smiled to see Anna in her nightgown and Mama's sweater, which trailed down to the floor. Even Miss Winston's hair was unbraided, although she had gotten dressed. At last, Kristen sat near the warm stove with a bowl of hot soup in front of her. Mama hugged her once more, so hard she was nearly lifted from her chair. Oh, I knew you shouldn't have gone with Papa to fetch the trunks, Mama said. But Papa said, Be glad Kristen came with me. She's a brave girl and a strong one. If she hadn't been along to help me, I never would have found the cave or my way home. Mama put her arm around Papa's waist. I can believe that Kristen is as brave as her Papa. Come sit down here and rest your leg. I'll bring you some soup. She smiled at Kristen. Don't let yours get cold. Aunt Elizabeth came to sit by Kristen as she ate. We were so frightened for you, Anna said. Our Papa wanted to go out in the storm to search for you, but Mama said he'd never find you on foot. We didn't know what to do. Were you scared? Kristen sipped the thick soup. I was scared, then I was too busy to be scared anymore. Anyway, we're here now, and we've got the trunk. Under the table shaved Anna's hand to squeeze. Anna put her head close to Kristen's. You don't want to have our surprise now, do you? Kristen grinned. This is St. Lucia's Day, and it's a perfect time, she whispered. St. Lucia's supposed to wake everyone at 4 in the morning. It must be about 4 now. Elizabeth pulled her chair closer. But how will we surprise anyone when they're all awake anyway? She asked. Kristen lowered her voice even more. When Lars and Uncle Olaf bring the trunks in, Mom is sure to want to open it. I'll sneak the white dress out. In the meantime, you can get the crown and the tray of bread. When we're all ready, Miss Winston can tell everyone to shut their eyes. How will that be? It's a grand idea, Anna said. I'll whisper to Miss Winston what she's supposed to do. Lars and Uncle Olaf carried the painted trunk to the middle of the cabin. When Uncle Olaf lifted the lid, the sweet scent of dried lavender filled the air. Kristen hurried to Mama's side. Mama reached into the trunk and out came Sari. Mama gave the doll a little hug and handed her to Kristen. I know how much you missed your doll, Kristen. Last night I missed you and Papa even more. Now we're all together again, even Sari. Kristen took Sari in both hands and looked at her closely in the flickering light. Sari was just a rag doll with a faded face and sun-bleached dress, but she was Kristen's very, very own. Kristen pressed Sari to her cheek. And here's Peter's clay whistle, Mama said. Papa smiled and held his finger to his lips. Peter had fallen asleep beside him. This has been such a long night, Mama said gently to Papa. You must be exhausted. Let's all get some sleep and finish unpacking the trunk later. Anna leaned around the end of the trunk and tugged Kristen's skirt. Do something, she whispered. At least find the sweaters for Mormor, Kristen said to Mama, and the pillow covers you wove for Aunt Inger. Unpack at least that much. Mama didn't need to be urged. Piece by piece, she began to lift their precious things from the trunk. She handed them to Aunt Inger, who laid them on the table. Kristen watched for her chance. While Aunt Inger was exclaiming over the pillow covers, Kristen slipped the white nightdress from the trunk and handed it to Anna. The red sash was right next to it, inside Peter's cap. Anna shoved them both under her sweater. Out of the corner of her eye, Kristen saw Elizabeth climbing down the ladder from the loft. She had their crown and candles wrapped in a quilt. The girls met at the far end of the kitchen by the door into the shed. Here's the tray, Elizabeth said, and Miss Winston's ready. Quick, put on the dress. It's cold. Kristen slipped off her dress and shawl and pulled the white nightdress over her head. Next came the red sash. Finally, Elizabeth fitted the crown on Kristen's head and lit the candles. Oh, Kristen, Anna breathed. You look like an angel. We're almost ready now, Elizabeth said as she lit the candle on the tray. Miss Winston came hurrying into the kitchen. I told everyone to shut their eyes and I turned down the lamps. Come now, they're waiting. Anna and Elizabeth scampered across the kitchen ahead of Kristen. Kristen lifted her head high, took a deep breath, and walked slowly, holding the tray of coffee and bread. The big room was dim except for the light of her crown. Kristen paused in the doorway. She saw everyone waiting with their eyes closed, and Miss Winston had asked them to do. St. Lucia invites you to breakfast, Kristen said. For just a moment the room was still. The only sound was the crackle of the fire in the stove. Then the commotion began. Peter rubbed his eyes. Oh, it's Christmas time, he cried. Everyone called out, Merry Christmas, and what a wonderful surprise. Kristen looked around the room as she pressed the St. Lucia tray to her family. Mama's blue eyes were shining, and Inger and Uncle Olaf were smiling with pleasure. Peter and Lars grinned and munched their bread. Miss Winston squeezed Anna's hand. Is this what it's like last Christmas in Sweden? Elizabeth asked Kristen as she handed Papa a mug of coffee. Kristen thought a moment about how much she'd loved the home she'd left behind in Sweden. Then she smiled at the cousins she liked so well. How happy she'd been tonight when she and Papa had finally found their way back to the new home, which was brightly lit for them in the dark. It's almost the same, but this year I think it's even better, she told Elizabeth. Yes, it is better, Christmas. I think it's the best one of all. Looking back, 1854, a peek into the past. Christmas in 1854. On the American frontier, Christmas was a time for special celebration. Settlers like the Larsons had a lot to celebrate. They had found new homes. They had good food, good health, and good neighbors. They were building new lives in America, including new American Christmas traditions. Just as people on the frontier taught one another good ways to farm, build houses, and care for animals, they also shared their ways of celebrating Christmas. Kristen told her cousins about the Swedish tradition of St. Lucia. In return, Anna and Elizabeth probably showed her how they celebrated Christmas on their Minnesota farm. Their first Christmas in America would be a cheerful mix of old and new, Swedish and American traditions. For families living in frontier towns in 1854, there were Christmas fairs and dances, church suppers, door-to-door caroling, and moonlight sleigh rides. But families who lived on farms had to make their own Christmas cheer. Their celebrations were quiet because frontier farms were far away from towns and from one another. Their celebrations were simple because work always came first on the farm. Cows had to be milked, horses had to be fed, fences had to be mended, and firewood had to be chopped, even at Christmas time. Pioneer families like Larson's couldn't celebrate Christmas for a whole month as they had in Sweden because there was so much to do to survive. Winter was hard in Minnesota, and the bitter cold, the wind, and the snow were always dangerous enemies. Still, pioneers found some extra time to make Christmas special. Mothers and daughters started to prepare for Christmas by scrubbing every inch of the house from top to bottom. They washed all the clothes and quilts and curtains and hung them out in the brisk, clean December wind. Cabins would smell delicious as special Christmas foods were prepared. Mama may have taught Kristen how to make breads, cookies, spiced meats, and cheeses from her favorite Swedish Christmas recipes. And Inger may have shown Kristen and Mama how to cook a frontier feast of wild turkey stuffed with dried berries. Miss Winston may have introduced them to pumpkin pie and Yankee cornbread. By 1854, Christmas decorations on the frontier came from many different countries. Some immigrant families decorated their cabins so that they looked like their homes in the old country. Mama would have draped bright woven cloths over the rafters and polished her brass candlesticks until they glowed, just as she had in Sweden. German immigrants introduced other pioneers to everyone's favorite Christmas decoration, the Christmas tree. Children like Anna, Elizabeth, and Kristen would have had a happy time decorating their tree with painted wooden hearts and little animals made from straw. They would have made ropes of dried berries too. Sometimes Swedish families in America decorated their barns for Christmas. They attached a large bunch of wheat to a long pole just outside the door. The wheat became a Christmas feast for the birds. Swedish tradition said that a large flock of birds at Christmas time meant a good harvest the next year, and a good harvest was always important to a frontier family. Candles were too precious for pioneers to waste, but on Christmas Eve, a family like the Larsons may have kept the old Swedish tradition of lighting a candle in every window to show the way for Jultamen, the Swedish Santa Claus. The gifts he brought to the American frontier would be simple and useful. Perhaps there would be a pair of knitted socks or a new hat or a scarf. Part of the fun of Jultamen's visit came from the funny jokes, poems, and riddles written on the packages he brought. Before children could open their presents, they had to try to guess what was inside. What do you think this present could be? Red as berries, soft as kittens? These are for Kristen, a new pair of mittens? Frontier families tried very hard to get to church on Christmas Day. Services went on all day long, but snow, cold, and work kept many families on the farm all day. After their chores were done, a family like Larson's might gather around their tree. They would sing hymns, read the story of the first Christmas from the Bible, and give thanks for the blessings of their first American Christmas. It's such an important thing to remember when going through really difficult times is to not just get through it, but to do it with as much grace and a good attitude as you can, even when especially when it's difficult. It's the most important. I know my husband and I were in Colorado, and there was a blizzard that came through, and I remember how scared I was. And we were in modern times, and there were people around, and there were services that could be used. And I remember how scared I was. I can't even imagine how scared real families were when they went through such difficult times in the American frontier, in the Midwest, in so many places in America and the rest of the world. So I wonder what difficulties maybe you've gone through, that you can think of, or that your parents have talked to you about, and you can think about maybe what could have made that a better situation, or what lessons you can bring into the next difficult thing that you have to go through. So we look forward to hearing from you, and we'll see you next time for another great story.